I would now like to introduce today's presenters. Titus M is a practice director and leads Everest's Group Cloud and Infrastructure Services, CIS research practice focusing on network, communication, and 5G services. He has assisted clients with their strategic planning initiatives such as go-to-market strategy, competitive intelligence, and deal outsourcing, especially in the telecom vertical. Mukesh Ranjan is a vice president in the Information Technology Services team at Everest Group, leading research in the areas of enterprise digital transformation, cloud and infrastructure, network, digital workplace, and cybersecurity. He has assisted clients in areas such as market positioning, deal outsourcing, and enterprise adoption benchmarking. Mohit Singhal is a senior analyst in the Cloud and Infrastructure Services (CIS) research practice at Everest Group, with a special focus on CME industry. He has supported enterprises in various projects, including deal outsourcing, competitive intelligence, and value proposition messaging refinement. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Titus.
Thank you, everyone, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar. I know given a lot of the registrants are from the APAC region, some are just starting the day and some might be full flow and about to get off work. So that's the beauty of this continent. So good to have you all here. Today, we're going to focus on a couple of things, and will be the flow of the entire webinar. First, we'll give an overview of the APAC communication, media, and entertainment market landscape, what are driving the growth of the enterprises in this vertical, what is inhibiting the growth, and what are some of the challenges and priorities that these enterprises are facing. And then we will talk about how IT outsourcing can be a key strategic lever in addressing some of their key priorities and challenges. And we will finish off with some forward-looking strategies that enterprises, service providers, technology providers can think forward going into the next fiscal cycle, as well as in the coming years, on how they can leverage some of these outsourcing mandates as a strategic lever. Feel free to drop any Q&A as we go. And if we can move on to the next slide. First, we wanted to start with giving the entire landscape of the communication, media, and entertainment market, especially when we talk about APAC. It's a very unique market compared to a North America or Europe region. The demand is very diverse. At the same time, it is also advanced and not so advanced. We will talk about that in detail, and it's a key pivot given the diversity of the market that we deal with. At the same time, while a lot of attention goes into technology companies like your Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, not so often people forget about how crucial our communication, media, and entertainment enterprises are to our economy. Imagine if one of our telecom operators is down for 2 days, we are going to have a lot of chaos and a lot of disruption in our economy. And they remain a key enterprise as well as a key powerhouse in how our economy and the global economy operates. And how we see the APAC market evolving in the coming years, especially in APAC, it's going to grow at a growth rate of 4 to 6, which is a conservative estimate. We can even see upwards of that if the global economy improves, the macroeconomic conditions improve, we'll see a higher growth rate. And primarily, these drivers come from both consumer-specific demand drivers. At the same time, there are ecosystem-specific drivers, and there is an economy-specific drivers, all three of them contributing to a significant upward trend in terms of how these enterprises are going to grow. Even if you talk about OTT, online gaming, digital advertising, these are the most sought out technology segments within these industries, and the consumers are actively adopting. In fact, APAC is the largest market when it comes to online gaming as well as OTT consumption. There are significant investments in technology. We are looking at large scale 5G adoption, mainstream 5G adoption. We are looking at increased adoption of AI and generative AI for personalized content. We are looking at VR, AR, and immersive experiences also getting into the fore. We are also seeing an expansion of digital advertising driven by social media and video ads, all of it significantly contributing to the demand that is coming from both consumers. Now, talking about the ecosystem, there are a lot of enablers that are sitting out of APAC, which drive a lot of demand. And there is also a lot of investment inflow that's coming from the global market, looking at the potential of the APAC market, which is also significantly driving the demand. Now, when we look at the economy specific drivers, there's a lot of government initiatives across the foray that is driving a lot of investments. They're looking into improving the infrastructure for communications. They want to connect the countries better, as well as provide support to all their citizens. And even if you look at the macroeconomic fundamentals, compared to any other region, APAC is the fastest growing market, and it will continue to do so in the next 10 years. Now, having said that, what we are going to see going forward is that while it's a growing market and it's a very attractive market, it's not an easy market to cater to because it's a diverse group. And when we talk about diversity, we have on one end of the spectrum, one of the advanced economies in the Japan, South Korea, and the China regions. And we also have Australia and New Zealand, who are also very advanced. At the same time, we also have markets in ASEAN and India, which are not so mature, but are increasingly improving their maturity levels. But the interesting point, and which is a key theme, is that any technology trend that starts to get adopted in any one of the region gets rapidly adopted in every other region. It was not so long ago when Mukesh and I used to work. We were talking about 5G just getting started in 2019. And back then it was just South Korea, China, who were leading the efforts on 5G adoption. Now, fast forward in 4-5 years, you are already seeing APAC being the fastest market when it comes to 5G adoption as well as the 5G speed. And we have seen almost all countries within the APAC region either starting their 5G journey or already amidst a large-scale adoption of 5G. And this will continue to do so. And in fact, compared to Europe or North America, some of the 5G speeds we see today in APAC are much more robust, much more resilient, at the same time, much more faster than any of the other markets. And this comes down to the fact, even though there is diversity, there is some unity in the market when it comes to technology adoption. And while we talk about that, there is also another factor that is driving the demand, which is APAC has the largest youth population compared to any other region. And that makes a huge impact for the vertical that we are in focus, because most of the communication, media, and entertainment demand comes from the youth, be it both social media or digital content or esports and gaming. All of these are driven by these. But at the same time, if you want to cater to all these regions, you have to cater to the specific needs of each and every region. Now, there are a huge amount of language diversity. When you're looking into producing content, you'll have to produce local region content across, say, China, Japan. Within India, there are multiple languages that you need to cater to. And at the same time, there is increased internet penetration, and so the adoption levels are very high. All of these are minor nuances, but make a significant difference in terms of how how this market is evolving. Now, going forward, what is going to happen is we are going to see increased adoption, increased diversity, at the same time, increased unity, and technologies needs to be and is a fundamental part of it. Now, what we're going to talk about is now we have set the stage of where we are in terms of the APAC, CME enterprises, how they're going forward and how it's going to evolve. Now I'll pass it on to Mukesh to talk about what are some of the CXOs talking about in terms of what they really require, what are their priorities, and I hand it over to Mukesh now.
Yeah, thank you, Titus, and I hope I'm audible. So it's few of the key, enterprise CXO asks right now in the industry, and typically there are four things that we are observing right now, and especially considering the macro situation, these are the four things we are observing. The first one is how do we drive revenue growth when consumers are really not doing a lot of discretionary spending, right? So that's the one. The one is how do we exploit efficiencies to enter markets and offer value services. Now, especially in the CME industry, this has become extremely critical because all of the offerings kind of have become table stakes, and there's not a lot of innovation, differentiation that there, and therefore people are looking to exploit adjacencies to enter some of the newer markets. The third one is how do we drive higher productivity and efficiencies leveraging newer technologies? Again, queries and questions to ask around AI and generative AI. What are the productivity benefits being observed from that? And then finally, how do we rationalize our provider portfolios while preserving business value and innovation? Now, what has happened over years is that a lot of these enterprises have had multiple providers within their landscape, and now they're really trying to optimize it. That from a portfolio of say 10 to 12 providers, they are looking to consolidate it to 2 to 3 providers right now. So these are the broad questions that enterprises CXOs are asking right now to us in this particular industry. Now what we'll do is run a quick poll. If you move on to the next slide, we can see the questions for the poll. Yeah. So we'll do a poll, right? And then deep dive into enterprise business priorities. But this is a poll, and you will get an option to vote on it. What are the top business challenges your company is likely to face in the next 12 months? The options are slowdown in demand, adapting to new business models, adapting to evolving customer needs, cost and margin pressure, or talent attraction and retention. So we'll just wait for a few seconds to see what the results come. And as the results come out, I think all of these are definitely some of the business challenges that enterprises are facing, right? But it'll be interesting to see, what the survey results show us in terms of how to spread across. Yep. So now we have the results on the screen for us, right? So very interesting, as I mentioned, typically there is all of these are relevant. That's what I said. And therefore you see that almost all of them kind of have got equal votes in terms of how, these are the challenges that the companies are expecting to face in the next 12 months, right? So the most relevant one is, or the topmost is the cost and margin pressures, which is very obvious right now. And the second is adopting to new business models, which is definitely the new PR, especially with everything to do around AI and Gen AI. I think people are looking up to, what enterprises should be doing. So what we'll be doing now is we'll be doing a deep dive into evolving priorities and challenges that SME enterprises are facing. And I'll hand over to my colleague, Mohit, to talk about it in the next slides.
Thanks, Mukesh. As some of you might be aware that at the end of each year, we conduct a study to understand key challenges enterprises are aiming to solve for in the next year. So these concerns, as you can see, are mostly in line with the survey poll results that we just got now. Adapting to evolving customer needs, cost and margin pressures, and demand slowdown have emerged as the top challenges to solve for in 2024. 2024, what we believe is will be a year of doing more with less, with enterprises focusing on achieving more value and higher efficiencies while operating with much leaner resources. That is, they will be prioritizing revenue growth through cost reductions and streamlining of their efforts. We also see one interesting thing, that is easing out of the talent situation. So, just to give some context, it used to be number one concern back in 2022, but over the years, the concern has subdued a little and now it occupies the eighth position. So, although it is still in the top 10 position, but it is not in the top five concerns as of now. Also, slowness in demand will continue to be a major challenge this year as well, and we'll be seeing a slightly muted growth because of recessionary fears. Moving on, so on the basis of our interactions that we have with different ecosystem partners in the CME APAC market, we have tried to capture some of the challenges which are being faced by them. Now, if I have to bucket them into different categories, they would be budgetary constraints, delay in ROI realization, environmental concerns, security concerns, data protection concerns, and some bit of talent attraction and retention. Now, talking about some of these specific challenges, lower than expected revenue from the consumer segments leads to delay in the payback period for projects, resulting in a postponed realization of investment that the enterprises have made. Also, significant initial investments are required in standalone 5G network deployments and other infrastructure, which in a way increases the OPEX pressure on these enterprises. One trend that we are observing is that there is a consolidation of streamlining of streaming subscriptions by different consumers. So, in a way, they are becoming more wiser with every penny that they spend, and this is leading to reduced platform subscription revenues. Also, there is a lack of trained resources in cloud, cybersecurity, and next gen fields such as blockchain, AI/ML, generative AI, and edge computing. Also, because of rising energy consumption and higher generation of electronic waste, there is an increasing pressure on enterprises to move to more sustainable practices. Moving on, so now we have understood the evolving priorities and different challenges that are existing in the CME APAC market. Now I would like to pass it on to my colleague Titus, and we'll be understanding how IT outsourcing can be a strategic lever in this case.
Thanks, Mohit. We will now launch another poll. So while IT outsourcing has been there for a while, there are elements of dissatisfaction as well. So if you can choose out of the five, what are some of the major factors for dissatisfaction from your IT outsourcing contracts that you have with providers? So the first option is not a lack of alignment with business goal. The second being a lack of control over the entire estate, security concerns, hidden costs, and operational difficulties. While we are getting the response, we did receive a question around security concerns and how are these enterprises mitigating them. It continues to be a major challenge, but at the same time, what we are also seeing is, given this has been a big key objective for many of these enterprises for many, many years, we have seen a considerable improvement in terms of how they are addressing these issues. It starts from a technology modernization, adopting some of the best in class technology choices in terms of network security and adoption of SASE and different technologies. But at the same time, we are also seeing an improved posture when it comes to adhering to third-party risk management. There is improved incident response and recovery mechanisms and operations they put in place. And another aspect that's considerably driving the improvement is the entire element of customer education and awareness, which most of these enterprises are taking care of. Now we can, as I'm not surprised with the survey results in terms of the equal distribution, and the major concern has been around operational difficulty. If we move on to our next slide, we're going to share some numbers in terms of what we are seeing from our internal survey estimates. And it's quite a shocker. Okay, we've been tracking this industry for quite some time, and the typical range of dissatisfaction in terms of percentage of enterprises not happy with their outsourcing partners has been around the 25 to 30% range. And this year alone, we've seen that considerably increase. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why this is increased and how we can mitigate them. And especially when we talk about APAC and the CME enterprises, this number is significantly higher. And a couple of factors are contributing to this. The primary reason is because the pace of evolution of these enterprises has been massive. We talked about the evolving priorities that Mohit touched upon. We have talked about some of the key asks the CXOs are asking these days. But if you look at how the outsourcing partners have evolved, the pace of evolution has not been enough. And when I talk about the pace of evolution, it's their technology mandates to some extent have been reasonably good enough, but most of them end up forgetting about the other aspects, which include client management, expertise in understanding the industry, and especially when we talk about the CME vertical, the requirements are very unique. The entire IT estate is so unique compared to any other industry vertical. And most of the enterprises are not getting the sufficient support that is required to meet these requirements. And one of the other factors that's especially we see in 2023 that caused a lot of dissatisfaction is there is a skewed attention to Americas as a market. And this kind of amplified only in 2023, given that there was a lot of macroeconomic talks and most of the partners, outsourcing partners, focused all their attention in Americas, leaving behind the APAC market, which also caused a lot of dissatisfaction. And 40% is a significant number. That means almost 1 in 2 partners that enterprises are working with are not happy with their outsourcing partners. Obviously, there are other factors which are around the complexity of the technologies that are being adopted, the entire aspect of managing the complex data that we are getting, the regional diverse nature of these data and the integration with them, as well as some of the regulatory complexities. But the main factor remains is the current outsourcing partners model, the way they approach and the way they address some of the requirements of these enterprises is still subpar compared to the needs that these enterprises are having. Because APAC is much more faster in adopting technologies and their demands are much more higher. And they also want to do more with less. Now, moving on, now that we've established that this amount of dissatisfaction and the foundational model needs to be changed, quickly talking about how this needs to be changed, the outsourcing landscape started as a cost arbitrage. There were cheaper resources available in certain geographies, and it primarily started and it predominantly remains as a cost savings model for most enterprises, but that needs to significantly change. Because right now, the amount, and we have data points supporting saying that 25 to 40% of their entire IT spend goes into outsourcing. Now, that's a significant chunk of your IT spend that goes into outsourcing, which means most of your IT is dependent on your outsourcing partners. And your IT is established as the business lever. Your technology is going to support all your revenue generation. All your business models are fundamentally revolved around technology. But when you look at how these outsourcing contracts are being done, there's a significant gap in terms of what the objectives are that are from a business and IT standpoint, and how these outsourcing contracts are being structured. When you look at any contract that's being signed today, there are major business and IT objectives which are mentioned in these RFPs and RFIs. But if you look at the responses that you get from the providers, there is no linkage between a direct linkage between the business impact that these outsourcing partners are going to bring. At the same time, a large portion of your IT impact also is not being addressed. And that is why at Everest Group, we've been proposing a value creation based model, which we have supported many enterprises on. And there are fundamental objectives that this addresses that your traditional cost saving outsourcing model does not. The foundation of the value creation model is shifting away from an SLA KPI model to an OKR and XLA model. In this way, we kind of significantly address the gap between the business and the IT objectives. And we also talk about continuous improvements in the processes, while most of the outsourcing contracts are 3, 5-year or even 10-year contracts. The continuous improvement is a key element given how fast the technology is being changing, actively managing risk and security posture. And another major aspect that this value creation model addresses is creating a competitive advantage using your outsourcing partners, embedding innovation within the construct in itself, and having a structured governance program and an active stakeholder engagement. That is kind of the foundational pillars. The biggest reason why this model works is it's a fluid model. It's not a fixed model where you enter a contract and in those 5 years, there are fixed SLAs and KPIs that they need to work towards. No, these keep changing, evolving over time, and they are targeted at direct outcomes and objectives that impact your business. Now, moving on, before we address how to adopt this value creation model, and we'll talk through in detail with examples, we have a special offer for all our attendees. If your organization, if you are an enterprise, if you are a service provider, and you're looking to adopt the best practices for outsourcing and how do you tie your IT and outsourcing objectives to your business objectives, please feel free to reach out to us. We can provide you a 30-minute complimentary readout in terms of some of the best practices we have been advising most of our clients with and how it is impacting. Now I'll hand it over to Mukesh to kind of talk to you about how to adopt this value creation model. And this is our proprietary framework.
Yeah, thanks, Titus. So I'll be talking about the 5-step approach that we use for IT outsourcing, focusing on value creation. Right now, it looks very simple, right? Basically, the steps are to define, plan, execute, track, and refine. But we'll be doing a deep dive into all of it. And, while it looks a simple framework, I think it's the second order details that make this really interesting. So when we talk about defining, it's about how does an organization actually think about value. So to do that, you need to gauge the existing market conditions and also determine the relevant IT outsourcing objectives based on organizational challenges and requirements. So what it means is that for each organization, value will mean something very unique and very different. The second step is planning. Right now, when it comes to planning, there are multiple steps that need to be followed within that. The two main pointers that come out of this is that planning the outsourcing landscape, considering various decision criteria and the sub criteria, right? So whom should we go? Whom should we select, right? From a long list of providers, should we go ahead with global system integrators, regional system integrators, or niche system integrators? And also define the results for each objective, right? So basically for everything that we have thought about in the define phase, there needs to be a result that needs to be thought of at the plan stage. And then we come to execute, right? So execution is basically progressing to achieve the results identified in step number 2 and establishing the timelines to maintain a dynamic approach. Then we talk about tracking, right? Now, again, tracking is something that a lot of enterprises think that they are doing. But if we peel down, if you peel the onion, we see that, actually they're not doing what they should be doing, right? They're using some very traditional metrics, some traditional KPIs to measure the performance, but it's not resulting into something very meaningful. And that's where we introduce the concept of OKRs, or objectives and key results. So basically, there is a result tied to each and every objective, and that is what you need to measure continuously. And for all of this, you assign criticality ratings, frequency of measurement, and best in class ranges, right? So it's not that we define an OKR and then, just measuring it without any industry comparison. It needs to have certain built-in parameters in terms of what an ideal OKR should look like. And then the fifth step is refining, which is establishing a baseline using existing inputs. And then based on that, you identify the potential for improvement and redefine the objectives and key results. So essentially, while it looks like a straight line from 1 to 5, this keeps on being a circular loop, right? So after refining, you again tend to define certain things, right? Because you are redefining the objectives and key results. So the entire idea behind this is moving away from the traditional KPI-based approach for IT outsourcing to adopt more of an OKR-led approach. What we'll be doing next is we'll be doing a deep dive into each of these 5 steps. And if we move on to the next slide, we'll start off with doing a deep dive into the define stage. Right. So what does define mean? Right. So essentially, if you do a deep dive and talk about it, essentially enterprise objectives from IT outsourcing, what all does it include? So it includes driving business-led innovation, gaining competitive advantage, reducing IT spend, minimizing security risks, and closing capability gaps, right? So typically these are the objectives that we see when we talk to different enterprises. And these objectives can be linked to various aspects of the organizations, its stakeholders, IT layers such as core systems orchestration, operation, and customer-facing functions. Right now, what are the some of the representative enterprise objectives, or in terms of, these are samples of how do you think about defining what do we need from IT outsourcing? So some examples are, say, enable proactive, agile, and cost-effective delivery by implementing industry best practices and bringing in advanced automation. Right, then you can talk about improving service quality by modernizing and transforming IT state with an as-a-service model. Then, you can also talk about safety and mitigation of risks through strong governance, agility, and flexibility. And time to market, I think very critical for a lot of businesses is how do you move fast and improve your time to market. And then finally, another example is how do you consistently optimize costs, enable an increase in scalability and transparency, right? Now, again, these are sample, right? These are sample, and illustrative in terms of how you can think about it, right? But the actual definition depends a lot around, the enterprise business objectives, the stakeholders that are talking about it, right? And there is more complexity than what it looks on this particular slide, but this provides a illustrative view into how you think about it. We'll do a deep dive into the other stages as well. So I'll hand it over to Mohit to talk about the plan, the planning stage of this 5-step framework.
So once we have defined the enterprise objectives that we want to achieve, we now move on to the planning stage. And it becomes important because we need to ensure that we are achieving our objectives in the best way possible. So if we move on, yeah, so these are some of the parameters which we feel are quite representative and will help us in deciding what to outsource, to whom to outsource, and what all to consider before outsourcing. We feel that while commercials and capability considerations are important considerations for an outsourcing contract, we also need to look at other criteria like the nature of work, strategic considerations, and risks that are involved. Now, nature of work will help us in deciding whether we want to outsource end to end operations or we want to follow a more gradual approach of outsourcing services. Similarly, with strategic considerations, we can strategize for best of breed service providers based on an organization's unique challenges and requirements. As we had seen in the polling slide also that alignment of business goals with the enterprise is very crucial to ensure an optimal outsourcing contract. And we feel that this strategic consideration becomes one of the most important steps or one of the most important criterias out of all these criterias. Talking about the risks that are involved, we also need to consider several types of risks, such as corporate risk, location risk, or service provider risk to ensure that the outsourcing is foolproof. So, in a way, all of these sub criteria and all of these criteria will help us in deciding the best outsourcing posture. Moving on, the second part of the planning stage involves defining key results for the objectives. So while objective is the thing that we want to achieve, how to achieve it and measuring our progress towards achieving that will be defined by the key results. So it is in a way one to many mapping wherein for a single objective we have multiple key results. Only thing that we need to keep in mind here is that the key results should be specific, they should be measurable, and they should be time bound. And in the end, we should assign them to a single owner or team to ensure full accountability. By defining clear, quantifiable key results, enterprises can track their progress and make data driven decisions and also know where to invest their time and resources going forward. So now just to take this example, we have taken one of the objective from the define phase that was to enable proactive and cost effective delivery by implementing best industry practices. Now, if you would see, we have defined 6 key results for that single objective and each of these key results is quantifiable, it is measurable, it is time bound and it is specific and it can be accounted or it can be assigned to a single team or owner. So just to give some more context, these key results, since we want to achieve the cost effective and agile delivery, we can do it either through reducing the average deployment cycle time, we can reduce the mean time to resolution, we can decrease the IT operations spending, and at the same time, we can also implement more of automation solutions to fasten the process, we can improve the operational productivity, and what is also important is that we receive positive feedback from all the stakeholders and the customers that are involved in that journey. So with this, I'll pass it on to Titus to take us through the next phase.
Yep. So while define and plan, we kind of identify our objectives and key results. I wanted to reiterate why this OKR model kind of works better than your traditional KPI and SLA. The key factor is this brings in more dynamic nature of how your outsourcing is done. And that is why this simple 5-step framework is very powerful and we've seen it work really well, and we'll talk about one of the examples on how we helped an APAC client with such an approach. While you start with defining your objectives, and the objectives can be multiple, most outsourcing contract, the biggest gap arrives in tying these objectives to the IT KPIs and SLAs. While some of these key results might look like KPIs, but there are more elements to it. The key element that comes and the difference from a KPI is these key results are evolving. And that is where in the execute phase, it becomes even more important to talk about timelines. And here we are talking about one of those examples that we have called out with the objective of implementing automation and advanced automation and improving your delivery as an CME enterprise. We've defined multiple key results. Now, each key result we need to kind of execute with timelines in practice. While in your traditional model, there is a project plan and there is a deployment time that they have. Here, it's much more measurable. And at the same time, you can hold your service providers more accountable to the timelines of execution, directly tying it to how it is impacting your certain objectives. And some of the other objectives can even be improving your time to market. And all of these can be directly tied to your revenue or bottom line impact. And we have seen that impact happening directly. And here we have given some examples of how can you think of those timelines and how do you build those key results. Now, I'm just taking one example is you wanted to achieve a 15% reduction in your IT operation spending as an enterprise. Now, you split those into timelines and how do you want to achieve them? Because in day one, you are not going to achieve all your 15% reduction. So how do you plan that? And this is where a more collaborative approach and governing mechanism is involved. And you can split those based on months, years, and depending on how your contract is structured. Now, once you have defined your timelines, if we move on to the next slide, it's important to track as well. And this is where we feel, and we've seen multiple examples, and it was not long back, Mukesh and I worked with a major enterprise based out of APAC. This was their problem statement. They were saying, hey, all our SLAs and KPIs with all our major outsourcing partners are green, but my experience is not. My internal stakeholders are not very happy with the performance that we are getting, but all the KPIs and SLAs are green. How do we resolve this? And this is, and we have survey points talking about it in detail. It's a fundamental issue with not just CME vertical, it's with every other vertical. And the fundamental issues arising because the tracking mechanisms are not dynamic. There are KPIs and SLAs that are standard and they are static and they are not going to improve over time. And that is why we always recommended an OKR-based model. If you are looking at continuous improvement and continuous innovation, and if you're looking to improve your business outcomes, OKR is the only way to go about if you're with your outsourcing contract. Now, how does this happen? And this is the example extending from the previous one. Now we're talking about 15% reduction in IT operations, and you put a timeline, say by 12 months, there should be 15% reduction. Now you need to assign a criticality to it. And once you've assigned a criticality, you need to do frequency measurements. So it could be a monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually. And this needs to happen with your partner at a regular place. I know most of them have a quarterly connect. And in most of the quarterly connects, this tracking does not happen effectively in a KPI and SLA-based model, but is very effective in an OKR-based model when all of these are very well defined. Now, once you've defined your measurement frequency, you can put a best-in-class range, which are acceptable ranges in terms of, hey, we were supposed to be at 15%, but even if we reach 13%, that is fine. So we can define a percentage of ranges that is an acceptable range in terms of, hey, we wanted to be here, but this is where we are, and these are the reasons for it. But this is an acceptable range for me, and so I'm fine with it. And that's how a tracking in an OKR based model is going to be more effective compared to your traditional KPI and SLA, because you're going to take action only if your KPI and SLA are not met, which is never going to happen in most outsourcing contracts. The KPIs and SLAs are defined in the favor of the outsourcing partner, and it in very rare cases only they're not going to meet those targets. Whereas in an OKR based model, there is moving targets that they need to achieve towards, and there is going to, your governance mechanism is going to ensure that your moving targets are being met. Now, once you've tracked and you've understood your best in class range, you'll also have to refine, which we'll talk about in the next slide. And once you've defined your best in class range, you need to continuously improve it. Otherwise, the entire objective of and the benefit of an OKR based model is not gonna work out. And it could, you can talk about improvements in terms of numbers, it could be qualitative as well, but you need to identify the potential for improvement and where can automation. So for example, in terms of automation, it was, you can think about, hey, right now our productivity has improved by 15%, but I think there's an additional 10% improvement that we can do, and assign that potential and work towards it. And now, once you have defined that, you go back to your objectives, you think about your objectives. Is this still aligned to my initial goals as an enterprise, or do I need to redefine the objective? If objective is fine, then you go back to the plan step in terms of defining the key results. And how do you address, do you need to change some of these key results? How do you need to change it? What are the new metrics? So you continuously improve and keep changing all of this. So this is how a simple 5-step approach that we take with most of our clients, and we've seen it bear a lot of fruits. Before we talk about one of our examples of how we helped our client, while this is a framework to adopt, there is another key consideration as well in an OKR based model that enterprises need to consider, is about how do you commercially structure this. For that, let me invite Mukesh back to talk about it.
Yeah, thanks, Titus. So in terms of commercial, what we have seen is that APAC enterprises are adopting a mix of outcome-based and traditional commercial models. From an outcome-based model perspective, we are typically observing two types of contracting, right? One is either via operational metrics, or second is the dollar impact created. Now, in the first type, under operational metrics based contracting, the provider's fee is linked to operational SLAs or KPIs. And in the second type, from a dollar impact contracting perspective, the fee is tied to either revenue increase or cost savings. Now, some of our observations, especially in the APAC CME market, right, is that majorly time and material and fixed fee persist as the dominant commercial models. And the adoption of some of these innovative commercial models is low, right? So, some of these outcome-based models is low, and wherever it is being adopted, it is generally being bundled with other traditional models such as T&M and fixed fee. And typically these represent less than 25% of the overall deal value. And we talk about outcomes, while it refers to both IT and business outcomes, but most deals with outcome-based constructs typically in this market have centric outcomes only, right? So a lot of it, overall, the view is that it still continues to be more traditional in nature. But again, our recommendation to enterprises definitely to keep experimenting with some of these, even if it's for a small portion of the contract. Next, we'll talk about an example, right, where we helped one of the global system integrators to create an OKR-based service delivery model for an enterprise. Now, here the objective of the engagement was that the enterprise wanted to embed an OKR-based services delivery approach, and the GSI required support in drafting and enhancing the OKRs based on RFP request and proposed approach for solutioning. So they came to us, right? So Everest Group supported this global system integrator, and we advised the client in drafting the OKRs based on organization's unique challenges and requirements, right? So it's something that, we standard template, but it was aligned to the unique challenges and requirements of the enterprise. Then second, what we also did is supported the GSI's deal teams in war rooms through strategic insights regarding large deals, OKR marks, and the solutioning elements, because it is very different from a traditional contracting model. And then finally, we help them craft an effective executive summary underpinned by the OKRs as well, which they could take directly to the enterprise. And they created the support enabled both enterprise and the system integrator to embed best-in-class client-centric OKRs within the overall service delivery engagement, and they could proceed right and implement some of these. So essentially, this is how we help both an enterprise and GSI together to implement an OKR-based service delivery model, right? So that kind of wraps up, right, the main content that we wanted to present today. And what we'll do now is we will quickly summarize the forward-looking strategies for 2024. And for that, I'll invite back Titus to talk about some of these and also take the attention to conversion from here.
Yep. So first thing I wanted to kind of bring back the attention toward is the CME vertical in APAC is growing, and at the same time, it has the most challenges compared to any other economy or any other market. They have the most amount of business challenges, at the same time, the most amount of demand as well rising within them. Now, to address them, the CME vertical has started to evolve. And with this evolution, it is imperative that you address the key technology aspect. And with outsourcing be a key component of your technology aspect, it is imperative that the enterprises rethink how they're doing their outsourcing contracts. It's no longer about costs. It's more about how do you generate more business value out of it. And this business value needs to shift away from just reducing your cost. It needs to talk about how it's going to directly impact your revenue. Now, for going forward, what we recommend these enterprises think about, and this is the things we want to keep in mind while you're thinking about your strategies, is how do you drive your outsourcing contracts and your partners to increase innovation across price, process, and technology throughout your engagement? How do you strategize for best of breed approach vis-a-vis just talking about vendor consolidation or looking at adopting different partners or proliferation of partners? Instead of that, how do you take a best of breed approach for your own unique challenges and objectives? And we did not touch a lot about generative AI, but it's going to have a transformative power. Our internal estimates roughly talk about a 15 to 20% productivity improvements just from outsourcing if you're working with the right partners. And it will be an agile and a future ready delivery that needs to be aligned with. While you're thinking about all of this, consider your several aspects of risk that many of them don't consider while thinking about their IT outsourcing contracts, especially given the fundamental nature of CME vertical, which is more crucial to the economy. The risks are much more crucial than any other industry. And think about your governance mechanisms and rethink about how do you think about them. And we also have implemented control ratios in terms of how do you think about these governance mechanisms along with OKR. So these are the messages that we want to leave with. Now we are open to Q&A that we did not address. So we'll go back to and check any of the questions that are there. Please feel free to drop them and we'll address them. I see one more question. I'm not able to load the Q&A. Just give me a minute.
Yeah. So maybe I can try and take it up, right? So the question is that how do CMMI kind of maturity models still useful in showcasing the maturity of IT service offerings or maturity of organization in IT delivery for CME clients? So yeah, I think, see, again, it's very similar to what we presented, right? When we talk about the various levels of the CMMI kind of model, right? So again, it's around the different levels around initial, managed, define, or quantitatively managed and optimizing. So that can be again used as one model, right? So from a maturity perspective and understanding, so it remains relevant, right? So short answer is that yes, it remains relevant. But at the same time, I think the perspective that needs to be brought in over here is that how do you ensure that you're linking it to value, right? So what we entire talked about today was that, how do you link everything that you are doing to value generated, right? Not just restricting yourself to one part of the overall value chain. For example, here we are just talking about maturity model, right? But it does not kind of link back to the value derived from or not even value derived, but value consumed by enterprises, right? So that is where it needs to kind of, it can be used, it needs to tie back to a broader narrative around value.
We don't see any other questions. Thank you everyone for attending. If there are more questions and if you want us to sit with you and talk to you in more detail about how to use IT outsourcing as a strategic lever, we have an offer only for the attendees. So feel free to take them up and we'll have a session with all of us for a 30-minute session.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Everyone, bye.